former White House trade advisor Peter Navarro decided to go on Fox News and float a conspiracy theory against Dr. Anthony Fauci. So let's take a look.
The father of Fauci's the father of the actual virus. Fauci's the guy. This virus, according to Bob Redfield at the Centers for Disease Control, came from the Wuhan lab. And basically, we had Fauci not only funding that lab with American taxpayer dollars, he authorized this thing called gain of function research. He allowed the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Liberation Army, to genetically engineer a virus using gain of function. I call it the Fauci virus now. If he wants to be the father or something, he's the father of the virus that's killed over 500,000 Americans.
Well, Peter, we're still trying to get to the bottom of that, and we're definitely going to bring you back when we get more information on it.
All right, so Rachel Campos Duffy didn't push back one bit. She's like, oh, great to have you on. There's some questions, but, great to have you. Great to have you. No, that was a conspiracy theory. I watched that and I'm like, wait, what the fuck? What? All right, so now here's some facts. All right. So there's been an investigation into the origins of the virus, report that's supposed to come out. And it basically what they're going to say is, and what they've already said about this, is that it didn't come from a lab. Okay, it didn't get genetically engineered. It didn't get created by the Chinese and released into the world. That's not true at all. Okay, so what they're saying is that it jumped species. Okay, so it went from bats to another animal that we don't know of yet, and then from that animal made the jump to humans. That happens a lot. Yes, viruses, bacteria, they do jump species. That has happened before. And according to investigators from the World Health Organization, it is extremely unlikely that the virus originated in a lab. I would add, of course, that the people saying that it originated in a lab without evidence to prove that are absolutely insane, and they want you believing in nonsense conspiracies. Why? Well, I've got a couple of ideas on why there are people out there saying that kind of stuff. For one, clicks. You see that all the time in the right wing. Okay, right-wing conspiracy theorists, they want you scared, and because when you're scared, it is easier to convince them that you are the only source of true information, because you're basically telling them what they kind of want to hear. Okay, and so there are people that take advantage of this, take advantage of the fear of coronavirus, and basically turn that into monetization. And that's what happens here. Okay, that's what this is. There's also people, of course, that want to sow division. Okay, for one, they want you to hate Asian people, and of course, there are also those who want you afraid, of China. They want you afraid that you continue to support more and more money going to quote unquote defense, which is really private defense contractors. There are people who basically, there are all sorts of different people who will benefit from pushing these kinds of narratives. And everybody's got different benefits that they get from this, depending on where they are. Again, if you're a person of power, then generally you're going to be concerned about the money. And if you really want to know what people's motivations are, you got to look at the money. So now, here's the thing. So now, it might seem like I'm defending China for a bit, right? Let me get something very, very clear. I'm not a tanky. Okay, China has made some serious mistakes regarding coronavirus. They did put out some propaganda about it. They hid how bad it was at first, and those mistakes, unfortunately, helped spread the virus. But it wasn't a conspiracy. The virus did come out of nowhere, and what happened is the Chinese government wasn't ready for it. Neither was ours. Okay, and what happens when something like this happens is that it embarrasses the hell out of the leaders. It embarrassed the Chinese Communist Party. Just like, of course, having the virus here embarrassed the hell out of the Trump administration. And he basically was like, oh, whatever, it's a hoax, it's all this stuff. And everything that the Trump administration had said about it in public versus what they actually said in private. And so point of the, kind of the moral of the story on that is that governments hate being embarrassed. And so there is some cover up. okay? Because there's nothing more that governments hate more than, of course, being embarrassed. But again, the right wing sees conspiracy everywhere, which makes it harder, unfortunately, to detect actual conspiracy theories. All right. And so now conservative websites have tried to tie Fauci to the origins of the virus by claiming that the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, of which Fauci leads, provided Wuhan lab with grant money that went towards creating COVID-19. Now, of course, that's false. Let me give you the facts on that. The NIH did provide grant money to that lab, which happens all the time. But there's no evidence that it was ever used to fund genetic engineering. They actually looked and they studied this virus. We've been studying it for quite some time now. And there's no evidence of genetic tampering, of genetic engineering to make this virus affect human beings. There's just no evidence of this. All right. But the problem with conspiracy theories, unfortunately, is that it's really hard, if not impossible, to disprove them to people who believe them. And that's the problem, because they always end up coming up with something else to say, oh, yeah, but what about this? And what about this? It just gets really, really difficult to do that. And so what I like to do is look at the motives of the people who spread it. So now Peter Navarro, great example of him spreading this conspiracy theory. So why? What would be his motivations? Well, it turns out Peter Navarro has some pretty extreme views on China, blaming China for basically everything. According to Politico, Navarro is perhaps the most extreme advocate in Washington and maybe in all of economics for an aggressive stance towards China. Navarro put his attention to China back in the mid-2000s. His first publication in the subject is a 2006 book called The Coming China Wars. So he's got a book. He's selling the book. There's a financial incentive to this for him to, of course, ramp up these China conspiracy theories. And he said that he had started to examine China when they noticed that his former students were losing jobs, concluding that China was at fault. And look, in Politico's description of the book, Navarro uses military language to refer to China's trade policies, referring to its conquest of the world's export markets, which has vaporized literally millions of manufacturing jobs and driven down wages. China's aspirations are so insatiable, he claims, that eventually there will be a clash over our most basic of all needs, bread, water, and air. So this guy is apocalyptic on China, all right? Blaming them, again, for the loss of millions of jobs and saying they're going to come for our water, air, and bread. Sounds more like capitalism, but I'm just saying. Navarro also said that a large part of China's competitive advantage over the United States stems from unfair trade practices. That he might have a little bit of a point. And I'm not saying that all of these points are necessarily right or wrong. But like there is nuance and there are facts here as well. Now, Navarro has criticized China for pollution, poor labor practices, government subsidies, producing contaminated, defective, and cancerous exports, currency manipulation, and theft of U.S. intellectual property. And again, some of those criticisms have truth to them, but he's not an expert on China. In fact, he tends to avoid speaking to actual experts because they actually know what's going on. And here, of the more than a dozen China specialists contacted by Foreign Policy, most either did not know of Navarro or had only interacted with him briefly. Kenneth Pomerantz, the University of Chicago professor of Chinese history, said that his recollection is that Navarro generally avoided people who actually knew something about the country. Columnist Jordan G. Shang was the only China watcher contacted by Foreign Policy who defended Navarro, but even he noted that he disagreed with Navarro's claims of currency manipulation, opposition to the TPP, and calls for high tariffs. James McGregor, a former chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce in China, said that Navarro's books and documentary in China have close to zero credibility with people who know the country and are filled with hyperbole, inaccuracies, and a cartoonish caricature of China that he puts out. So as I said before, China's got issues. I have issues with China. I think that they do exploit workers. I think that they, have some big issues with, civil liberties, for example, of their people. And not only that, but they're participating in the really, really bad treatment of the Uyghur Muslim population, genocide, perhaps. And so there are real issues going with China, okay? And here's why. Okay, so let me float my own idea of why Peter Navarro hates China so much. Well, for one, they're not white. Let's be honest with that. But all right. The other thing that, as an economist, he's incredibly afraid of, I think, is that their economy, the Chinese economy, has gotten really large. They've had a gigantic boom. And their economy is likely to surpass America's in the coming decade. And so, from an American economist perspective, that scares the shit out of him. And look, China, by the way, is a giant state-run corporation, essentially. And so I know a lot of people get like triggered when I say that, but that's essentially what they are. They're kind of pretty capitalist in their own strange way. And so, that's why they've had this expansion, because they were able to do all these different things. And so there's a lot more nuance I could get into about China. But generally, I'm going to focus more on this guy. Okay. And so the thing is, while there are issues with China that are legitimate, that doesn't mean you have to come up with insane conspiracy theories to then go after China. Because the result is you're not hurting any of the Chinese leaders. Okay. For one, you're going to end up actually with this rhetoric hurting people who have nothing to do with the Chinese government. Asian Americans. Asian Americans, innocent people, are actually being attacked as a result of this kind of rhetoric that we have seen. Research reporting by forum Stop AAPI Hate revealed nearly 3,800 incidents were reported over the course of roughly a year during the pandemic. Mostly, the vast majority, over 60%, directed at women. So this is causing people to come out, people who are scared of coronavirus and all that stuff, to come out and literally physically assault Asian women, for the most part. They're the ones who are the victims of this rhetoric. I mean, that's terrible. It's insane. And again, it's fed into, it's really, this is fed into by people like Peter Navarro. And again, you can criticize China. You can criticize the Chinese government. I do it. I encourage it when they do something wrong, of course. But to make up these conspiracies, go on the air and tie an American official, Dr. Fauci, who disagrees with you, by the way, on policies and some of your assertions, go on TV, lie about him, spread conspiracies, in order to really cover up for the administration's failures, the last administration that you happen to work for, to contain the virus, who failed to contain the virus here, that last administration. It really is just super, super disgusting. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.